Alright guys, welcome to another video from XF Motorsports. It's been a while since we made a video last, but now we're starting to make a few more videos just because there was a lot of work to do, and now we're finally getting back to work on things we had to work on. So this is the engine from the S2000. If you remember this from a previous video, the guy bought this car, and literally the first day he bought it, he managed to blow up the engine, which later we found out wasn't really his fault. It was a pretty broken engine from the start, and it had been put back together multiple times and had hammer marks and stuff all over the place. But now the engine's finally back from machining, and all the parts for the engine are here. And I was actually working with Adriel, and we already did some work on it, so he's going to explain what we did.
Yeah, so right now we're rebuilding an F20 motor. We already put in the bearings, measured the clearances, and put in the oil squirters. So everything's pretty much cleaned up, and now we're just gonna continue with the rebuild process over here.
Yeah, so next we are gonna put the crankshaft in. We're gonna torque everything to spec, assemble all the other parts of this engine, and I'll show you as we go along and everything. And after that, we're gonna be ready to put this engine back in the car and hope that it all works. So quickly showing you guys the engine and all the parts. This is the engine after it has been machined and everything. So when we took this engine out of the car, things were really far out of clearance. Like the block had ovaled up pretty much like by I think 0.006 of an inch or something, and it was horrible. So it definitely needed oversized pistons and all of that. So I really wanted to convince the owner to go with the stronger internals, lower compression, and like get the car ready for turbocharging, but he did not want to do that. So he instead decided to return everything to factory spec. So he went with factory oversized pistons. These are the same ones that come in the factory engine, but they're just oversized by 0.25 millimeters, which was enough to, after machining the block, it was enough to return everything to its factory clearances, which are really small on this engine. I believe not sure what it is in millimeters, but I think it's 1,000th of an inch, the clearance between the piston and the wall. Extremely small. I've already measured that out. We've assembled and disassembled the engine a few times just to make sure that all the clearances, even the crankshaft and like the bearing clearances, are perfect, because all the clearances are pretty small on these engines. Even the main bearings, they come in a few different color codings, so you can see this brown over here, the black over here. So basically these refer to different thicknesses, same as they are on AMG engines actually. So they have to match in a certain way according to numbers on the crankshaft and on the block, and then you need to also measure it and make sure that they are within the factory spec. And actually one more step that we have already done before putting it back together is cleaning. Make sure that whenever an engine has been machined or anything, there's always going to be aluminum and dirt in the oil galleries. So they have to be cleaned really well, and all that needs to be taken out. And also, this one, since it was a blown engine, there was pieces of copper everywhere, so they had to be cleaned really well. Even the crankshaft had to be cleaned, and all the marks that you saw on the crankshaft before, they had to be polished out so that everything returned back to a nice smooth surface. So there was quite a lot of preparation required for this one, but yeah, now let's get to the fun part, putting everything back together and seeing how everything works on this one. Okay, so now the pistons and connecting rods and everything is back in place, and here's how everything moves when you turn the engine. And there's quite a lot of markings on it. The AA and BB are from the machine shop, because two of the new pistons were slightly bigger than the other two. That's why he machined the bores accordingly and marked them. And 1, 2, 3, 4 are by us, because the connecting rods were used and we had to put them in the appropriate locations and also use the appropriate bearings for them, just so that the clearances match up and they work properly. After that, it was time to put the oil pump on and start assembling the front of the engine. The part selection on this one was a little weird, so we were reusing the old chains and one of the timing chain guides. So here's a look at everything so far into the rebuild, and you can see one half of the engine is back together, the lower half, and it's looking pretty clean. All the gasket maker and everything now looks a lot better than what it was before, because, well, if you remember when we were taking this engine apart, this was a pretty packed together engine. There was gasket maker bulging out of everywhere, sandpaper marks and hammer marks on all the surfaces, so it was pretty hacked together. So yeah, hopefully now things should be better than what they were before. But next we need to get to, well, getting the head ready so that that can also be bolted on the engine, which, well, still requires quite a bit of work because we haven't really even done any disassembling or cleaning on it. So yeah, next up we need to take the intake manifold off, take the exhaust manifold off so that we can get all the valve springs off, remove the valves, and then give everything a really good cleaning. After that, yeah, we're also going to be making sure that all the valves are sealing properly, and if everything is good with the head, then we'll just have to put everything back together, assemble it again, and put it on the engine. For disassembling the head, I had to do it Honda mechanic style, right on the floor, because the shop was getting pretty full at that point. But to make matters worse, when I did the gasoline test on it, it turned out that all the valves were also leaking. Here's a look at the head after it has been disassembled, and well, the crappy part is even the head is not in the best condition. There is quite a lot of rust on the valve seats, because of which they don't seal perfectly when you do the gasoline test. There's a bit of gasoline dripping already, so that means I'll need to lap them. I'll need to make sure that they start sealing properly, because that's really important. If I put it back together like this, the engine is not going to make its proper compression. There's going to be air leaking out of the valves. And also, yeah, you can see all the sandpaper marks and everything, so some idiot has already been through it, and also all the gasket maker and stuff. So yeah, there's a bit of work required on this one too. The engine, the deck we already measured on the CNC machine. That was, even though that also had the sandpaper marks and stuff on it, it was still within factory spec. That's why we didn't resurface the head. But this one too, we'll check really soon to make sure if the head is within spec, which I'm really hoping it is. But even if it's not, resurfacing the head is not too difficult of a deal. So, but yeah, let's hope we don't have to do that, and let's hope we get away with just lapping everything and putting it back together. So yeah, let's actually start off by cleaning everything, because it is extremely dirty. Here's a look at the head after it's all been cleaned up and put back together. And I was doing the gasoline test again, just making sure that everything is sealing up. And to my relief, actually, finally, now everything is sealing up. The lapping definitely worked. Now there's not a drop of gasoline leaking through any of the valves. And that was definitely needed, because without that the engine would have never made its proper compression and would have never made its proper power. I still think the compression was mainly low because of the block being worn out, because the block was worn out by an extreme amount. When we first measured it, when we took it apart, all these cylinders had ovaled up by quite a lot. But now, of course, that the machining, the block has already been machined and brought back to its factory piston to wall clearance, and the head is also sealing properly, and all the clearances at the bottom end are also back to their factory clearances. I think this engine should definitely make the same power as what it would have been making when it was new in this car. Next, let's actually get to putting the head on, putting all the head bolts, head gasket, tightening everything down, and then we'll get on to the VTEC system, putting this all the rockers and camshafts and everything back in. Okay, the head is finally back on, and this is the clever VTEC system that you see on top of these engines. They have these roller rockers, but there's 3 of them rather than 2. And one thing to even also check before installing this and everything is make sure that all the oil passages are clean, and make sure that all the pins and stuff for the VTEC system are in there. So there's this pin in here. Basically, the way that it works is that one side gets fed with oil pressure, so that pin that you see in there comes out. Once it comes out, it pushes on this pin, and then this pin pushes on this little spring-loaded pin in here, and basically all 3 of these rockers lock together when the VTEC is engaged. So there's also 3 springs, which you might have noticed when the heads were off. So the 3rd spring is to push on this middle rocker so that it's not flopping around on its own when VTEC is not engaged. And then again on the camshafts, you'll see the same thing. They have 3 cams over here for each 2 valves. So basically what happens is these 2 are much smaller cam profiles. They just open the valves halfway, which is a profile meant for low RPM and when the engine is at low power levels. And when it goes above a certain RPM, VTEC engages. Actually, as it turns out, I was at my dad's Honda dealership, and he has this really cool VTEC demonstrator which shows how the VTEC system works. So basically, yeah, 3 cams at the back. When VTEC is not engaged, this is how the valves move. You can see they only lift like halfway, they don't even open fully, and the duration is also smaller. And then when VTEC engages, this pin, you can see these pins lock into each other. So when you turn this, one pin goes in and it basically locks these 3 cams together. And now when it spins, the middle cam does all the work, and it lifts all the rockers fully. So now you can see that the valves will open to their full extent. And of course this can happen when the engine is even spinning, because actually it's done by oil pressure. Oil pressure feeds in, and that's what takes this pin out. In this one it's just mechanical. Yeah, now the next critical step is to get the timing right. We need to bring the engine to TDC for cylinder 1, which is, I believe, this mark right here. And after that we need to, there's a few things drawn on the cam that we need to line up a certain way, and then the engine will be at its proper timing. So now the camshaft and everything is on, and well, the next Honda part to do is measuring the valve clearances. These are not hydraulic lifters like Mercedes have. These are just solid lifters, so they have the screw for adjustment, and sure enough, even that is really off on this engine. So on a few of the valves, it's like it's really big, and on other valves, it's like massively tight. Okay, the engine's all back together. We've already put the transmission on and the starter, and we were doing a quick compression test on it. We're getting 210 psi on all the cylinders, but I think when it's actually in the car and wired up properly and the engine is spinning at its proper speed, right now it was cranking pretty slow. I think the compression will be a little higher, and once it wears in, the compression will, I believe, still go higher, because right now it's a freshly rebuilt engine. It's cold, it's not even up to temperature. So it definitely should, the numbers should pick up, but still, these are way better numbers than before, and the consistency is amazing. We're getting the exact same number on all four. So now, the next thing we need to do is we need to put the intake manifold on, we need to put the exhaust manifold on, spark plugs back in, of course. And then we're going to be ready to put this engine back in the car. This time, well, we changed our plan a little. Last time when we took it out, we just took the engine out from underneath because we were doing it on that lift. But we didn't feel like doing it that way because that would have made things difficult to test before putting the engine back in the car. So that this way, putting the whole engine together, we were able to crank it, test it out, and make sure that everything was normal before we were even putting it in, just to make sure that if there were any faults we could have fixed it at this point, which luckily I don't think there is. So yeah, let's go to the next few steps and get this engine bolted in the car. Now our initial attempt of putting the engine in from the top didn't really work out because there wasn't enough space to slide the engine in this way. Later we had to take the engine back out again, remove the transmission, and put the engine and transmission in the car separately. So after a bit of a fight with the S2000, we have managed to put the engine and transmission in the car, and apologize we did not get all of this on camera. The camera died midway and both of us were pretty busy struggling with the car, that's why none of us bothered to fix that. But yeah, we ended up putting the engine from the top, the transmission from the bottom. To add to our struggle, the clutch sleeve was completely stuck on this one. It wouldn't retract, so we had to take it off, put it on the vise and free it up. And also some other bolts were stripped, which were stripped from when we were actually pulling things apart on this car. But also the drive shaft bolts were also stripped, and these ones I did not have right now, so that's why I have to wait for them for later. But we're getting really close to getting everything done. There's just a few more things that I need to bolt on. All the wiring and everything is already connected. A few more things that I need to connect on the top, and after that we're going to be ready to fire the car up, which I was really hoping was going to happen tonight, but well, it's already pretty late, and the next few things we can't get done because we need to wait for parts. So yeah, the S2000 has managed to delay itself probably for another few days. I have to get it off the lift for now because tomorrow there's a few other cars coming in which I need the lift for, but next time the car goes on the lift, hopefully in a few days, we're gonna get all this done and then hopefully fire it up. So yeah, getting pretty close. Let's hope that everything goes to plan and we get all this running really soon. So here's how things are looking with the S2000. This is hopefully going to be the last day with this car on the lift because we're getting pretty close. I tightened up everything on the engine and put everything back in place. Adriel is working on putting the shifter and everything inside the car back in place. How's it going, Adriel? It's okay, you're getting there. Make sure that the handbrake thing fits through the plastic before you put the rest on. So pretty much everything that we have to do now is fill in the fluids and start the car. We can actually start it without the airbox and everything over here, since this car doesn't have a mass airflow sensor. It's just a manifold pressure sensor. And yeah, let's fire it up. Let's hope that everything on the engine works okay. And if that's the case, we just need to lift it one more time, button up everything at the bottom, then take it for a test drive. So here's the first start on the Honda S2000 finally. Everything went fairly smooth for the last part actually. Just turned the key for the first time. Everything started up. Yeah, crazy. The only thing you hear is the injectors clicking and stuff, and also the throttle response and everything. Seems pretty good. So all that is pretty good. We'll look over everything one more time, make sure there's no leaks or any of that stuff. We still need to bleed the clutch because we have to remove the master and yeah, free it up. So just a little bit of those things left. We have this ground wire connected over here because we haven't connected the proper ground that needs to go from the engine to the chassis, but we'll do that. And yeah, let's get these last few things done and take this car for a test drive. See how everything feels now with the newly rebuilt engine. After everything was put back together, there was still one last problem. The clutch sleeve was extremely rusty on this car, and it just didn't work again once we put it back in, so it was leaking a little bit, but I ordered a new clutch sleeve for later, which we ended up changing later on. Okay, test driving the S2000 for the first time after the rebuild, and it's going to be a little difficult test driving it with holding the camera on a manual car with one hand and test driving it, but Adriel's not here right now. It got pretty late, so he left, so that leaves me for the test drive. There is a check engine light that does come on sometimes for an O2 sensor, but let's see if that comes on during the drive. I just reset the codes. I did give the engine enough time to warm up before taking it for the test drive because clearances are super small inside this one. Don't want to take the chance burning anything, but yeah, other than that, drives pretty much like a normal S2000. Windows are tinted super dark in this one, so you can't see a thing out of the car when you're driving at night. Let's give it a little bit over here, see how much power this car has now. Ooh, nice. Okay, that is nice. That is a lot better than before. What the hell? Okay, it has some power now, that's for sure. Nice, that is a lot better than before. I don't want to push it too much either because the engine hasn't even been broken in yet with all new internals and everything, so best to not drive it that fast, but I definitely did want to push it once at least to find out if everything was okay. But yeah, definitely seems like the power is back to where it should be on this car. It is a 240 horsepower car, so don't expect it to be as fast as like an AMG or something, but so let's carefully take this car back to the shop, have a look underneath once more, try to figure out these last few things so that the car can be fully complete and hopefully goes back to its owner, who I'm sure is probably going to be happier than what he was before when he bought the car, and it blew up literally the first day when he bought it. But pretty cool. I'm actually happy driving it. This actually seems it seems like a nice car to drive. Okay, so last day with the S2000. I'm working Honda mechanic style over here underneath the car because the clutch sleeve just came in, and the lift was already occupied by the better car. This car we are actually twin turbocharging, so the new clutch sleeve is here. Pretty easy to put it in. It's 2 bolts, 1 clutch line, and then we're gonna have to bleed it after. Some grease over here before we put it in, and then that's going to be everything for the car. The O2 sensor we're not going to be replacing for now because I couldn't get a hold of the part in time, so the person's going to take it for now, and it's winter already, so he's just going to be storing it. And then that boy, testing the S2000 again. Let's see if he notices any difference at all. That one.
That feels lighter. You change the master.
Yeah, the slave. It's better now. I like the clutch.
After 6,000 though. Yeah. Below 6,000 is like crappy, but just AP1 S2000 things.
Yeah. You just keep it above 6,000 all the time. That's how you drive an S2000.
Do another?
Sure.
Okay, yeah. Feels different.
So that was everything for the S2000, but giving you guys a quick peek of what's going to be coming up next, most probably in the next video. This is an SL63 that we were twin turbocharging, but before we could even start twin turbocharging it, there was a broken head bolt and a few other broken things on it that we had to fix and get the engine back together so that it's ready for twin turbos. So that's why it's in quite a few pieces right now, but once we do put it back together, we're going to be putting two massive turbos on it, a billet intake manifold with an intercooler inside it, and it's a pretty cool thing, but it's a difficult thing, so I think it will take a while before you do see a video on it and you do see this car working again. But you guys are going to be seeing quite a few videos coming out this winter because there's just quite a lot of bigger projects that are lined up that we are going to be making videos on. Previously, through the last few months, we were just busy getting quite a lot of cars out of here and quite a lot of parts that we needed to make just because there was a lot of work piling up, and they were mostly day-to-day cars with smaller repairs. That's why we didn't make too many videos on it. But now we've stopped taking all those cars because through the winter there's a lot piling up that we need to get out at the shop. There's that CLK, that Bentley that we need to get working, this SEC that we also need to get working. There's another red Mercedes SL that we need to fix, and also the F1 project, the project that I'm really excited about. It's a full replica F1 car that we're building, and we do need to also finish that through this winter because summer, things get really busy with all the day-to-day cars, all the parts and everything, and nothing gets done through the summer. So that's why this time we do need to get all this done through the winter. It's going to be a really busy winter, but the good news for you guys is that you guys are going to see quite a lot of videos coming out on all these projects. So if you want to stay tuned with all of this, consider hitting the subscribe button, notification bell, and I will see you in the next one.